Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert, along with Father Joe Grimaldi, and this is indeed the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast. By the way, lots and lots of people chiming in on one of the podcasts that we did, Do Dogs Go to Heaven? And so we got a lot of feedback on that one, and we want to thank you all. We got some good and we got some bad. And the bad ones, by the way, were intended to be good. But to kind of sort of pull on your cape, Superman. So
I love it.
Yeah. But, you know, it gets me to thinking about various things that I remember as a kid growing up. And we've been through a lot of these before. And we've joked about eating meat on Friday, the cheeseburger on Friday, and the fact that we were doomed forever to hell. And I came across something the other day. It may have even been in a conversation, I think it was, where somebody kiddingly said to me, "Uh-oh, that was a mortal sin." Do we still have mortal sins, per se, in the Catholic Church? I mean, I know that there's sin, all right, but do we still have that title?
If it is, and if we do have it, you don't hear it too often. Sin is considered serious when it's serious, and I don't mean to be funny by that. But I think, you know, if you consider murdering someone, that's a mortal sin. There's no question in my mind. The word mortal throws me off, to be honest with you. I would rather say serious sin.
I like that too.
Yeah, I think to me that really carries the meaning across in a better way. There's different degrees, is what I'm saying. When somebody commits sin, you have to examine the motives. You have to examine what the thing is that he did. If it's, you know, if it's of itself something evil, killing somebody is not necessarily automatically a mortal sin.
No, of course not.
But it can be.
Well, when you think about war.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Self-defense.
There was a time, however, that they actually had what were considered to be the 7, I guess, serious sins. Pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. Isn't sloth basically you're kind of lazy?
Exactly, yeah. But you could be lazy to the point where you might be scheduled to do something very important. It's a sin to not get to it, is what I'm saying.
And maybe that also lends itself to taking advantage of someone else by being excessively lazy.
Correct.
Okay.
So because somebody else is going to have to do your work. But if you look at the, one of the definitions I like about these sins, if you want, is you might look at it as a perverse love of something. Because, you know, you take something like gluttony, okay.
Yeah, I was going to go to gluttony next.
Yeah, because gluttony, in my mind, I think I'm guilty of it too sometimes.
I could lose a few.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's that way, okay? So it's a perverse love of food, that would make it something that is... I have a funny story, by the way, about gluttony, and I think you might enjoy it, maybe not. When I was in the training as a brother, and we had a confession week, if you want, and so we would all be in the chapel, and we had this very old priest who had spent many years in the missions. You know, he was, maybe today we might say, as the beginnings of dementia. Whether or not that's true, I don't want to take away from the story. But anyway, this poor novice goes into confession, and he says, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." And of course he says, "Yes, my son, what is it?" He says, "I've committed the sin of gluttony." So out loud, everybody in the chapel heard the priest say, "You can't commit the sin of gluttony in this place." But it was the food that was so bad, or whatever the case might be. I got the biggest kick out of that with gluttony.
Now, greed, I can't tolerate greed. Somebody that's very greedy is not on my best friend list. Let's put it that way.
Well, then you're answering the question yourself. Then there's got to be something wrong with someone who is greedy.
Yeah, but I know a lot of people that tend to lean a little greedy.
Yes, but there's a difference, and I think sometimes, and maybe they are, I don't know, the people you're referring to.
They're not in my inner circle, let's put it that way. They're not good friends.
No, but what I'm saying is that You think of greed and you think of somebody who likes to accumulate things and so on. That in itself is not a big deal. But if it becomes a big deal where it deprives other people of what they may need and so on and so forth, then there's something seriously wrong with that. I just want to go to wrath or ire. That's another one that's always
Okay.
a difficult situation because, first of all, we all have a reaction to something that is bad, okay? And it's a natural reaction. We can't control it. If somebody calls me or my mother or my brother or my friends some evil names, I'm going to be angry immediately, okay? Now, is that the sin of ire or the sin of wrath? No, I don't think so, because that's a natural reaction.
Sure.
It's a gut reaction. However, when you dwell on that to the point of, well, there's somehow I'm going to get even with that guy, even if it means destroying his property or doing things of that sort, where it becomes almost like an obsession. So it's an exaggerated meaning of anger, if you want. Anger in itself is very often just a natural reaction.
It is. It truly is. But you know what you just made me think of? Wrath? Road rage.
Road rage.
Road rage.
But
and it seems to have just amplified over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I relate to it. I have to admit that I do. So here's what I do when I'm getting ready to travel, and I do it. I sit down and say, okay, Grimaldi, you're going out on the road. Somebody's going to be too slow or too fast. Somebody's going to cut you off. So here's the thing. Take a deep breath. Let it happen. Take a deep breath and let it happen.
I'm doing it now.
Do not react. Do not react.
You'd be a great yoga instructor.
So, but if you repeat that often enough to yourself, when the situation occurs on the road, and it does occur, inevitably it does, you're not going to go wild over it. Oh, you'll be a little upset, but you'll remember that you have to take a deep breath and just relax.
Relax and let it go, and think about how good you'll feel saying, see, now that wasn't so hard, Grimaldi.
Exactly.
Pardon me for using your last name there, but I
Why
was
not?
using it in the topic of the story, of course. We haven't done pride. What's wrong with pride?
Pride? Again, it's not pride in itself, because first of all, if we're people who are confident of what our gifts are, we should be proud of what we can do. But proud to the sense of what? Shaming others, or to the sense of lording it over others and things of that sort? No, I don't think so. But pride, it's like, okay, the piano player who does a great job delivering a nice piece of music, and you say to that person, wow, that was fantastic. And his response is, oh, well, it's not really me. I mean, well, baloney, it is you. And just say thanks.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
Thanks for your compliment.
Nicely played.
But, you don't need to get your head all out of whack because somebody gives you a compliment. When you think of humility, there's what's called true humility. And true humility is acknowledging the gifts that you have. And the gifts that you have are not always yours. They're given to you by God, either directly or indirectly. Directly, some people are born with talents. Indirectly, some people have earned them because of their status in life. So the thing is this. These are gifts that you have. Say thank you, and then thank God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you would say that, because one of my closest friends, in fact, he was my agent for many, many years, just a wonderful guy, died suddenly, probably one of the worst days of my life. Absolutely adored this guy. He loved to play golf. I liked to play golf. We would go out and play golf, and he would occasionally hit a really, really nice shot. And I would always say, hey, bingo, nice shot, Mike. He'd turn around and always say to me, it was, wasn't it? He would acknowledge the fact that, yes, it was a really great shot. Probably happened 15 or 20 times. I said, excuse me, time out. I just said I complimented you. In the future, can you just turn to me and say,
Thank you.
thank you? And you know what he did forever on after that? He said thank you. In fact, he said thank you more often than I think he ever did.
Well, that's what it's all about, really. I think you realize that those gifts you have are given to you. You don't automatically come up with those yourself.
Well, I gave him a sleeve of balls at the same time, so
You're
maybe
a good
that's why.
man.
Yeah, maybe that's
You're
why.
a good man.
So we've gone through pride, greed. Okay, the toughie now, not so tough. Lust. You want to address lust?
Yeah, I mean,
It
lust.
should be fairly obvious.
Yeah, I think it is. First of all, lust is kind of a natural inclination that everybody has to an extent. But when you go overboard, see, this is where you see things like the perverse love of something or someone, if you want, the perverse love. I deal with a lot of people who are spending too much time on the internet watching pornography. Now, that is serious sin. They're spending time more on the machine than they are with their wives. And to me, I can't understand it, and yet, psychologically, I guess I can. If a person considers himself or herself somewhat inadequate in those areas, well, maybe the pornography helps them or whatever the case might be. One of the problems I see, though, it causes a lot of tension in marriages. The wives begin to realize, I know I'm being a little bit sexist here. It could be the other way around, huh? The individual who's hooked on that stuff, his partner is going to say, well, that's better than I am. Well, first of all, they fail to see that whatever you see on the internet with pornography is usually very exaggerated. It is not the actual truth. So the thing is that then people expect their partners to perform the same way, and it doesn't happen. And so this is where the tension occurs. And believe it or not, it could even be a cause of marriages ending because people are so involved with that.
Wow.
So you relate that to sin, and of course, there you go.
Let's cross over to the other side, soften it up a little bit. I remember as a kid as well, that was a venial sin, Ken. Be careful, you're borderline mortal, but that was a venial sin. Is there such a thing, and does a venial sin still exist?
Well, again, a lot of it has to do with terminology, because when we look at the value of sin, it's various degrees. We discussed mortal, or very serious sin, and then you come down to the bottom rung, which is basically not so serious sin. What would not so serious sin be? I don't know. It depends on the individual. For example, failing to write a thank you note for somebody that's given you a gift, and yet you say, well, I didn't do it intentionally, so it's okay. I would guess better minds than mine can come up with a whole list of things that are picayune, but by the same token, they're failings. Okay? I like to use the term faults and failings. These could be failings, where we could have done something better and we didn't. You might call that a venial sin. Once again, you bring up a title that's hardly ever used anymore, because they use the degrees of the sin, serious as to not so serious, as opposed to mortal, as opposed to venial.
Quickly, two things, and we can do it real quick. Yeah. In school today, elementary school, let's say in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, how is that handled in elementary school when it comes to teaching about what sin is?
I don't know. I would have to guess.
Okay.
I would think when you speak with children, obviously you try to get across your idea in the best way possible. And it's not going to be the same as speaking to an adult. But, this is something hurtful that you did by bullying that other kid.
Did they use that word, do you think? I mean,
hurtful?
No. I just wonder if kids have the same understanding or if they explain and use the word sin.
No, they're not going to use sin, but they're going to say, this is something hurtful. You were bullying another individual, and it is wrong. I guess if you emphasize the idea that it is wrong, to me, it's associated with sin. Sin is missing the mark. Here you're supposed to aim for this, and you're over here somewhere. So I think it's important that little kids be aware of how they miss the mark. And it's only if they have that training throughout their grade school years, and as they develop, the language that the teacher uses develops as well, then I think sin will work its way in.
To wrap it up, can I simply rely on the Ten Commandments to discern what is right and wrong? Or did I just go in a whole new area?
It's a new area, but it's an interesting area. No, you did well. I did well. Who am I to judge? Anyway, let me put it this way. The Ten Commandments, I think, are rules for civil living. If you want to live in a nice situation, you follow those 10 commandments. When we speak about morality, I think we have higher degrees of rules, if you want. I hate to use the word rules because it's more a way of life, not rules, you know. It's like the rich young man. I keep the commandments, and Jesus says to him, have you given to the poor? Give to the poor, and then we'll talk about heaven. But the idea is, yes, keeping the commandments is good. We all could always be better than the 10 Commandments.
Well, thank you once again. I learned a lot. Like I told you so many times before, it's just I come out of these things refreshed and renewed, and there's nothing like learning something new every single day. And today I learned to speak a little Italian. And I've learned a lot of things.
And drink a little wine.
Drink a little wine and
build a bonfire.
I always enjoy getting together and having these chats with Father Joe Grimaldi. We hope you enjoy it as well. And thank you so much for spending some time with us. And as always, we'd like to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, please share the podcasts with a friend, a neighbor, or the rest of your family maybe. It's a great thing to do. It's the gift that just keeps on giving, I think.
Let me say this, without your motivation, I don't think we would be as successful as we can be.
Well, let me just put it this way. I thought I was pushing it just a little bit when I said it's the gift that keeps on giving, but what the heck, I think it is. All right, be well, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert, Father Joe Grimaldi. We'll see you next time on the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast.
See you soon. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you have a question or a comment for the Father Joe podcast, send it to fatherjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's fatherjoepodcast@gmail.com. Follow Father Joe on Twitter @FatherJoePodcast. The Twitter address again is @FatherJoePodcast. Please subscribe to the Father Joe podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and soon on iHeartRadio. We also ask that you rate the podcast and feel free to leave a comment. And finally, if you have a friend that you think might enjoy the podcast, please pass it along. Thanks again for listening, everybody, and see you next time.